Hey guys, Thomas Genie here, aka Mustached. I'm here to review the movie Scoob, which came to the homes because of the times. Anyway, this is the newest rendition of Scooby Dooby Doo, which is a classic among classics. And I am here to review it, the good and the bad. Here we go. So I guess spoiler alert? Question mark? I don't know. As if you could spoiler alert a Scooby movie, but then again, this movie doesn't really have a mystery to solve, at least in the main story anyway. And I'll get to that in a bit. But, uh, time for the recap. So the movie starts out on this little beach in Venice. I believe that is the location that we see. So we see that Scooby-Doo is stealing some food, which is a bizarre way to open a movie with Scooby-Doo. Uh, and he's running from a cop, bumps into Shaggy, who goes through the "I'm alone in this world" cliche, and every musical cue that I change to is also a "I'm alone in this world" cliche. Nonetheless, he eventually goes to the beach. He eventually ends up meeting Scooby there, where the cop bumps into the two of them. And once the cop asks for the dog's name, because Shaggy says he owns him, once he declares the full name of Scooby Dooby Doo, he's off the hook because his middle name was given. I don't know. It's really stupid. Cop goes on his way. The two become best friends. Shaggy gives him the collar at the beginning of the movie, right after this, and Scooby makes this promise to never take it off, which is important because it comes into the movie later on. Anyways, we cut to a more foreboding time, the Halloween, which you would think, why wouldn't you just start the movie on Halloween? I don't know. Seems like a thing you might want to do. In fact, why didn't they start the movie on Halloween? If anything, that would just build up the atmosphere to a Scooby Doo movie. Furthermore, you could have accomplished the same thing without the crime stealing for the two characters and have them just re-bump into the three other characters, because that's what happens. Shaggy gets bullied, his candy that he has collected gets tossed into a house, and he meets Freddy, Velma, and Daphne. And the three of them are just already friends, I guess. Um, Anyways, they go to check it out, and they see it's a ghost that's haunting the house. But they start to slowly, at least some of them do, start to see that there's a string at the thing that's pulling the ghost around, and they they tie up the ghost eventually, and then they do him in. They 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 take off the mask. They found out that this guy was a robber of many items, and from there, the crew decide that they want to solve more mysteries together, and it shows them running into a new location and cut it, and then them running back out as adults. So that is our transition. While it does the classic intro, so for an intro, it you know aside from random Scooby Doo theft, this movie does seem to start at a very promising part. So, as they have montaged into adulthood solving a various amount of crimes, and cases, I should say, more so, they eventually want to extend out. They want to get bigger. They want to open up an official business. So they want to have someone who they can, uh, you know, by them, I guess, is the best way I can put it, I suppose. And thus they meet Simon Cowell, played by Simon Cowell. He plays himself in the movie. Now, you might say, well, that's a bit random. Well, not for Scooby-Doo, probably. See, they've had their fair share of crossovers, if you don't already know. They've met up with Batman, the Globetrotters, the Three Stooges. They've had so many crossovers with so many other things. So, you know, a a celebrity playing themselves in this is not so surprising, to say the least. Anyways, he says that there's no investment that can be had if the weak link in their group is as weak linked as he suggests Scooby and Shaggy are. So they get too upset by this and they go out on their own, separating from the other group, going to a bowling alley. They get attacked while there after having some funsies by a mechanical machine set of little robots. While that's going on, the other three, Freddy, Daphne, and Velma, get a call, a convenient call, if I dare say so myself, that makes them say, oh, they're there. So, yeah. Anyways, back to Scooby and Shaggy, they run outside, and this random light of flash picks them up from into the sky. There, they meet a woman named Dee Dee, and they get shown on the ship to this Blue Falcon and Dynamite. Now, Blue Falcon, if I'm not mistaken, and Dynamite have their own show, a separate Hanna Barbera show. It's one of the ones I actually didn't watch as much, probably, or I don't remember as much. I think I do recall Dynamite, but I don't remember seeing much of the show still. Anywho, we then cut to, oddly, both the best and worst part of this movie, the villain, Dick Dastardly. So, he is the villain, and that's a problem, because we know he's the villain. They say he's the villain. He is shown as the villain. And again, this is a Scooby-Doo movie, and we know who the villain is. Why? Isn't the whole point of a Scooby-Doo mystery to be mysterious? No. In this case, we know who the villain is. Again, he's a fun character. Dare I say the best character in the movie. Dare I deserves its own movie because his plot has nothing to do with Scooby-Doo, but they force it to do with Scooby-Doo anyway. His story, in fact, is actually rather absurd. Again, it should be its own movie. Anyway, so they talk about this plot where he has two of these skulls and he's trying to accomplish something. We as the audience do not know what it is yet. Nonetheless, so we cut back to the other three, Fred, Daphne, and Velma, who arrive at the scene of the crime, and they find a robot, a destroyed robot, and they get a little hint at their villain right then and there. So anyways, Dick Dastardly yells at his robots for failing. Meanwhile, Scooby-Doo and Shaggy do what they do best, and they start eating up some foods. So we start to learn that apparently Scooby-Doo is related to some ancient dog? Question mark. and that they need to head to a certain location to find this third skull. So they end up getting a clue or a place to check. And in this park where they arrive, and it's a trap by Dick Dastardly. Who would have figured? So Scoob enters this mirror house, and this is where we get our fair share of dick jokes. Because Scooby-Doo can't say dick, he can, because all of his D words come out as R words, or start out with hard R's. So, you get lines involving Dick claiming that he is one, indeed, a dick. So there you go, a bunch of dick jokes. Anywho, Scooby-Doo manages to wiggle his way out of that situation. Meanwhile, Shaggy and Falcon are hiding about. They manage to get a device thing that the Falcon has on his person to go off and cause a little bit of destruction along the way. So the others manage to get there eventually. And Dee Dee picks the Falcon and Shaggy and the others two up. They recollect. So they're on the ship. They're looking for the next location, and the Blue Falcon wants to suit up that Scooby-Doo, and this is where the thing comes in of the collar, right? So Scooby doesn't want to do it initially. He's looking at Shaggy. He's looking for approval from Shaggy. Shaggy nods, so Scooby's like, okay, you gave me permission, I will do so. He takes off the collar. He gets his new power suit. And it leads to even more nonsense, so we'll get to that. Anywho, so he's suited up in the power suit, and meanwhile, the other three are traveling to try to get to Dick Dastardly's other location, like where he sets up shop. But they get pulled over by a female cop. And they come out of the car, and it turns out that this female cop was truly Dick Dastardly all along. And he had found them through the alien robot thing that they had captured. They brought it with them. So he was able to use that as a way of finding them. Meanwhile, Daphne ends up helping one of the little robots, or had helped out one of the earlier robots, one of them that got a vacuum robot head as a punishment, as they are captured. And this allows the little robot thing to help her out. They find this room where Velma is able to make communication through Dynamite. And Dick enters the room, seeing his old pal Muttley. And thus he goes into his backstory, and this is what I was talking about, this story that is around Dick Dastardly. So, the tale that is woven here is bizarre, and again, feels like its own movie onto its own, is that Dick Dastardly sent Muttley into hell. That is literally what happens. And in hell, the location that they were looking into just so happened to have a lot of gold. So once he sent Muttley in, He grabbed some gold, but he couldn't get out. And while at the first sight of that, or just trying to enter him in, Dick Dastardly seemed like, yeah, just get in there. But when Muttley got stuck, he started to actually legitimately worry. Because even though they're both evil, they are in fact a unbreakable duo. Despite their quarry when they meet up. Anyway. Um, so anyways, meanwhile, the Falcon crew, with Scooby in his new uniform and Shaggy being all pouty, break into the ice. And this is where Shaggy gets upset at Scooby. And it's probably, this is another cliche in movies. It's that downhill moment of like, oh no, what are our heroes gonna do? Everyone's upset and sad. It's that cliche. And in this scenario, Scooby's in the right. I'm just gonna say it. Scooby is so in the right in this situation. In fact, he goes out of his way to try to defuse the situation, which Shaggy is the one who was like prepping up. He was like, "Oh, I'm so mad, zoink, Scoob," stuff like that. And Scoob is like, "Hey, man, you did tell me, you gave me permission. I thought it was cool." Stuff like that. And I don't want this to be a choice. It doesn't have to be a choice. And he's totally right. But, the movie's like trying to portray like, oh, they both have like something to be wrong in the scenario about. But I'm sorry, the way the movie presents it Scoob is totally in the right in this scenario. Anyways, Scooby-Doo goes with the Falcon crew. He picks up the scent, and they find another Hanna Barbera crossover. The something caveman. I forget the first part of it, but yeah, he's another Hanna Barbera character. Nonetheless, so Scoob picks up or Shaggy picks up the collar, or one of the two picks up the collar, remembers the promise that the beginning of the movie sets up. But again, I just don't feel like they did enough to make it feel like that was a bad thing for Scooby-Doo to do, since he asked permission and was told yeah. Anyway, Shaggy eventually he's on the landed ship, and he meets Fred. By the way, the other crew had gotten already captured by Dick Dastardly, so we as the audience already know, and the acting even portrays Fred oddly, so we already know that that's Dick Dastardly coming in to make his moves. So anyways, so they end up in this cave with the caveman and the third skull, and he says that they must pass a trial and fight him in order to get it. And Scoob is trying to use his suit's powers. It's not working all too well. And the others get thrown off the ship because they also arrive there. Dick Dastardly does. He throws off the crew, the remaining three, and they all get saved. And thus, the two groups have a little duking out system, and then Dick Dastardly gets away with the skull of all. So, and in the process, Scooby-Doo also gets captured. So, Shaggy sees all that, and he makes his rally speech to the remaining group, saying all this stuff about how they're gonna save Scoob now. So anyways, Dick Dastardly lands, and he opens the floor gate And meanwhile, Dynamite is carrying the crew with him to get up there. And while Dick Dastardly is trying to shoot them down, the little vacuum robot is on their side, so the little robots are helping them now. And Dynamite proceeds to save them. So Dick Dastardly gets the Hellgates to open up, and Cerberus is let loose. And Dick Dastardly manages to get his dog Muttley back, so, he did the thing. And they, of course, go back to try to steal some extra gold in the process. So, in the process of this, Fred's vehicle got destroyed, so he goes charging in and gets bumped. And again, the robots are now helping, trying to defeat Cerberus. It turns out that Shaggy, through all this kermuffle, was also destined to be set for greatness. It wasn't just Scooby-Doo, because Scooby was related to some ancient dog. Everyone kept saying that the prophecy was about Scooby-Doo, and it turns out that Scooby-Doo was a part of it, as well as Shaggy, because it involves the best friend of the dog, which just so happened to be Shaggy. Alrighty. So, after getting the Cerberus back in its place, they capture, with the help of the little robots, they capture Dick Dastardly, and they bring him back with Muttley. He's still in trouble. They get him pinned down, and they proceed to look at him and be like, "You're in trouble." But then they're like, "Wait a minute, this doesn't seem right." And they do the classic trying to pull the mask off, and underneath is Simon Cowell. And they literally do this, and they're like, "Oh, it's Simon Cowell. What? That makes no sense. Go for the double unmasking." And they say it in the movie that this has never been done before, and it's still Dick Dastardly. So that was kind of pointless. So anyways, the Falcon returns. Some time passes. They build their little mystery shack. They get a little party invite from the Blue Falcon, who gets them a new car. And then the three that are inside, which is Freddy, Daphne, and Velma, get a call for their next case, and there we go. It's setting up for the next movie. And in the credits, we see even more references to Jabberjaw, and somewhere in the movie, I forget where this happens, but we also get a quick reference to Hong Kong Phooey, which is another Hanna-Barbera property. And that was Scoob. So yeah, a Scooby-Doo movie without a mystery, as its main plot anyway. There was a mystery in the beginning, a quick one, and then a setup on a new mystery at the very end, but the main plot has nothing to do with that. It has to do with Dick Dastardly going to hell to get his pup Muttley back. And again, I feel like that deserves its own movie. Like, I don't know, I feel like that could have gotten away with that, with, having your main character be the villain, and then just him trying to get his dog, and that's the entire movie. I feel like that's its own separate thing from Scooby-Doo. And in terms of Scooby-Doo, again, there is no mystery, which I feel like is off-brand for Scooby-Doo. Like, completely off-brand. Like, why did they make this movie without even considering that that's kind of what people are expecting when they look to Scooby-Doo? That's what Scooby-Doo is kind of built on. I don't know. Why would you write out the mystery part of the mystery? It seems a little bit unnecessary. This movie definitely feels like more of a crossover than an actual mystery. And I don't know if they're trying to purposely build up this Scooby-Doo universe where all these other Hanna-Barbera characters are jumping in and out, but I don't know. It still doesn't feel like a great Scooby movie. Still, like, what what were they thinking? And again, there are other parts in the movie that just don't fit. The beginning part where Scooby is exonerated for being a thief. We have Shaggy get angry at Scoob for like a reason that he inflates, and Scoob is trying to deflate, and it makes Scoob look like he's completely in the right, and he is. Um, you have this whole thing with Blue Falcon being the son of a hero, and he's not really good at it at all. Um, so Dynamite and Dee Dee are the ones pretty much doing everything. Um, which is again, that in itself feels like its own story, but it's all globbed together in this one movie, and it definitely feels like there are three movies fighting each other in this one movie, and it's all crossed over very poorly. Is the best way I can put it. It's just like, okay, we're just gonna meet the caveman now. We're just gonna have Blue Falcon mysteriously pick up Shaggy and Scooby now for reasons. We're gonna have Dick Dastardly just be the obvious villain and have him have his own story worth of movie content and throw that into the same movie. It's like, calm down. There's so much going on. It's very messy. Uh, and I'm not a fan of messy. And in terms of characterization, the characters play in terms of like they play the parts that you expect them to play if you know the characters. But if someone were to say for be new to the franchise, be new to Scooby Doo, I don't think this is the best place to start. This is gonna confuse people that might be new to Scooby Doo. I would not recommend this as a first Scooby Doo movie at all. You need to know the characters because the characters' characteristics are already pre-set up. They don't need they don't they expect you to know what the deal is, except that they botch the mystery part of it for whatever reason. Um, so that is bizarre, but whatever. Uh, I'm gonna give this movie a 5 out of 10. I think that's being generous. Um, I feel like there were hints of like really good stuff, but it just so happened to be stuff that's not completely related to Scooby Doo necessarily. Again, the stuff with Dick Dastardly is really fun and interesting. It's so fun and interesting that, again, I would say own movie. Um, Even Blue Falcon's story, hell, I would say that again, it's its own story. You could fill your own story with that concept. Um, and yeah, the stuff with Scooby Doo, that could be its own story. You could really flesh out the characters that you already have plenty of. You have to fill in for 5 characters. That's plenty to work with. I'm not sure why you needed 3 additional characters plus a villain in his character. Like, the movie has too much going on. And then there's the caveman, which is its own mini thing within the 3 other stories that they're trying to tell. Um, so yeah, too much going on, and it's all packed in this one movie. Um, and in terms of anything else, the characters I feel like don't really have any memorable moments that are good. They just sort of play the archetype of what they're supposed to be, but they don't have any. I don't want to say they have any standout moments, particularly necessarily. Maybe Daphne at that one point where she like makes communications with Dynamite, but other than that, I'm struggling to think of like, okay, what's a moment that would be stand out for Scooby Doo or Shaggy or you know any of the other characters. Anyway, uh, I've spoken enough. That's a 5 out of 10 for me. Uh, so yeah, sort of in between on this one. Kind of just like, eh. Anyway, that's my review, and if you ended up enjoying it, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, make sure to check out those links in the description. One will head you over to my Discord server, the other to my Patreon page. Any donations are greatly appreciated. And until next time, everyone, bye bye.